If you're anything like me and enjoy physical fitness or the pursuit of bodybuilding, and you've lurked on the internet on associated message boards or forums over the years, it is highly likely you would have at least encountered the name Zyzz, better known for his online persona and alter ego of Zyzz. Now, in recent weeks, I have had a good period of my own training in the gym and have been feeling motivated. And in addition to this, I've enjoyed reminiscing on the internet culture of the aesthetics movement. This phenomenon in bodybuilding and the fitness industry is now widespread across all social media platforms. However, it is not necessarily a modern phenomenon by any means, with its origins stemming back to ancient Greece, or more recently the golden era of physical culture and bodybuilding in the 1960s and 1970s. But with a seismic shift within the sport in the late 1980s and 1990s, the emphasis was no longer on aesthetics, but on mass building. As a result, only the most dedicated fans maintained an interest in bodybuilding, whilst the general public began to consider it a niche pursuit and even something to be mocked on occasion due to the loss of widely considered objective excellence or attainable beauty standards. Bodybuilding lost whatever connection it may have once had to beauty, health, or cultural relevance. Prior to approximately 2008, the public perception of a boy or young man who pursued bodybuilding, even as a hobby, was that they were wanting to get absolutely massive and end up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Ronnie Coleman. This proved to be rather ignorant, as whilst Schwarzenegger and Coleman in their prime may have been impressive in their own right, very few people would actually have wanted to look like them, and much less had the genetics, discipline, or resources to do so anyway. Therefore, just as social media was getting off of the ground, so was the popularity of anonymous message boards and forums. The growth of the internet thus gave rise to the growth of small online communities where a tech-savvy individual could find like-minded people and share experiences. When specifically related to bodybuilding or fitness, these online communities congregated and still do congregate at bodybuilding.com's general discussion or MISC forum, as well as 4chan's Fitboard. As such, as an enthusiastic member of these niche online communities himself, Zyzz became a poster boy for a generation of teens and young men online. So, as a result of being able to assess the whole cultural scenario as well as Zyzz himself with more mature and knowledgeable insight, I thought it would be a fun and interesting idea to make a one-off video analysing the phenomenon of Zyzz on a deeper philosophical level and actually trying to get to the theoretical roots of what made him a simultaneously unique, captivating, motivating, divisive, infamous, and yet altogether interesting character. If you've watched any previous videos on this channel, you will know that the story of Faust and the notion of the Faustian spirit has been a key component of all the content released up to this point. At the risk of repeating myself yet again, a brief synopsis of Faust is as follows. Written in 1808, Faust is a classic tragedy by German writer and statesman Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The main protagonist in the story, the character Faust, is based on the legend of the 15th century scholar and astrologer Johann George Faust. In the story, Faust is highly successful but is ultimately dissatisfied with his life and is seeking more from it. This strong desire leads him to make a pact with Mephistopheles, who works as an agent for the devil Lucifer. At first, Mephistopheles warns Faust of the choice he has, and tells him that the pact would mean selling his soul in exchange for power and unlimited knowledge. This is the story from which the cultural motif of a Faustian bargain or a deal with the devil originates. Without a Faustian spirit to push the limits of what is possible and to always be striving for more with our inventive nature and dangerous sense of dare, we quite possibly never would have achieved all that we have in the civilized world up to this point. Yet the question will always remain: how far is too far? How much is too much? What are we willing to sacrifice before things turn negative? The answer is a matter of subjective opinion. With this context in mind, it's clear to me that even Zyzz was his own personification of Faust, without him perhaps knowing it at the time, and just doing as he felt in the moment. Just as Faust sold his soul for power and unlimited knowledge, Zyzz sold his soul for aesthetics and popularity with steroid usage, drugs, and constant partying. Zyzz was relentless in that pursuit. He achieved it quickly, came on the scene and went by in a 3-year flash, lived fast, died young, burned out rather than fading away, died randomly while still at his peak, so the inevitable decline of his Faustian bargain was never outwardly seen in the public domain, only perhaps by the man himself, knowing he was living too intense or too degenerate and destructive of a life, but following it to its destined end anyway, which in a strange sense is actually admirable, as he had made his choices and was following through with them regardless. It is the fact that his life story is precisely that tragic Faustian archetype to the letter that makes him still well known in popular culture and the fitness industry. It is possibly why it affected so many people online, and or why he was motivating for some during his life, being a social media influencer before influencers were even a thing. Nowadays, anyone who directly copied or copies him is seen as inauthentic and cringeworthy. Even if what he was doing or how he was dressing was considered cringeworthy at the time, he was at least the first to do it, so was noticed because of it. Finding deeper philosophical significance to the Zyzz phenomenon has actually been very fun and motivating, both intellectually and physically. Using a very contemporary example to discuss and explain deep and powerful philosophical concepts. There's a definite Faustian bargain element to the scenario, as previously mentioned, but it is also quite likely that Heideggerian doctrine pertaining to philosopher Martin Heidegger and his magnum opus Being and Time would assert that Zyzz was living as what Heidegger described as being, Dasein, or presence, and was thus living authentically, acting in the world on his instincts, rather than overthinking or over-rationalizing and thus being inauthentic due to never acting. It's not even necessarily a question of whether what Zyzz did in the world was moral or not. It's a question of whether he acted in the world or not. And the answer is clearly yes, he did. Life is not just a case of Descartes' I think, therefore I am. Being precedes thought. Instinct precedes thought. The world of what is precedes the world of what ought to be. Do or do not without too much thought, or really any at all, and you will be more in tune with the inherently chaotic world and thus less anxious about life in general. Innate feeling as opposed to constructed and restrained thought. The sportsman often speaks of being in the zone, as to when he performs at his best or most instinctive. Similarly, Zyzz was in the zone in his life for the period of time that he was widely known. He was a man of his hedonistic time, and a man of this world, or this present state of being that we are all in. Thus, it's hard to imagine he would have been anything else other than himself, which is why he was admired by so many for better or worse, because his persona and physique was and is an idealistic construction of what many people seek to be in this specific world at this specific time. Lots of people would sell their soul for some form of perfection, always have and always will. So, in a way, Zyzz was a literal personification of man's deepest desires. He actualized what many men feel subconsciously, and he did so by losing most, if not all, of his inhibition. Because he reached a point of such supreme confidence that he would do things others would only think about doing but never do, due to their own embarrassment. Which is why the way he acted stood out to people, and why he was often laughed at or scoffed at for his actions, but also secretly admired by those doing the laughing, and that's something that he became aware of. It's the power of charisma, and it's why still to this day, 10 years on from his death, there is, or seems to be, a sense of legend, myth, and aura about him, and will continue to be for a while yet, the longer time goes on. So there is even a premise that he achieved a minor sense of possible immortality.